You know, we've been talking about the life of David. David was a great man of God, a man after God's own heart. And so David was a man after God's own heart, right? He's trying to live for the Lord, but he has these people keep attacking him all the time. You know, he has this guy named Saul who is envious of David and envious of David's good works and is trying to kill him and kind of runs him off from his homeland, and he goes into this other part of the world, right, and lives for a little bit, and he's kind of living out of the will of the Lord. He wasn't supposed to do this. So he's kind of living in a wicked state, and we looked at that. And one thing that happens while he is out there is that these enemies that he is living with decide to build up their army and to go attack his home country, okay? So David decides he's going to go with them. Well, what happens is when he gets there is that the leaders of these other countries say, hey, I don't want David with us. He's with these guys. We don't know if he's going to turn on us. We don't know what's going to happen. So, and that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want the enemy with me either and behind me. You know, I mean, surely David would have turned on them and killed them. I don't think David would have killed his own people. So the Philistines say, yeah, get David out of here. He can't fight with us. And this makes sense to David. But this is where we pick up in the story. Because David ends up going back to this little country that he had amongst the Philistines. It was really outside of Gath. Gath was where Goliath was from. Do you guys remember that? That's where Goliath was from. And he's kind of made friends with these people since then. And we're going to see in later chapters, he has warriors from Gath that join up on his team to help him take back Israel here in the future. But all these things end up working together for good for David. Even though he's out of the will of the Lord, you know, the Christian life can be hard sometimes. And I'm not making excuses for David and the stuff that he did. You know, we can sometimes kind of sympathize why he did certain things. I'm not making excuses. He did some wrong things. But nonetheless, he kept moving forward. Even though he would make a mistake and realize he was wrong, he kept moving forward. And we're going to see David finally comes to a conclusion here. I'm doing wrong. I need to do what is right. I need to get my crap together, and I need to follow the Lord. We're going to see that in just a minute. But look at 1 Samuel chapter 30. Because this is where he was just with the Philistines. He was going to, we think, attack Israel with the Philistines. And the Philistines said, nope, we don't want David here. He's a Hebrew. He will turn on us. Get him out of here. So he heads back to his town, which is called Ziklag. Okay, that's in the Philistine area near Gath. 1 Samuel chapter 30, and it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag and smitten Ziklag and burned it with fire. Now, so notice what happens. He had this little town. He left it to go help the Philistines in this war against Israel. The Philistines say, hey, this guy's an Israelite. We don't want him fighting with us, behind us, beside us. And that was smart on their part. So David gets sent back home. Once he gets back home, his town has been burnt to the ground. And his wives were captive, the women were captive, everybody's been taken captive, which he don't know that they've been taken captive. All he sees is a burnt down city. For all he knows, they're dead. He don't know. You know, we reading the story thousands of years later can know that here in the minute, he's going to go get his wife and his children back and everything's going to be okay. But at this point, he just sees a burnt down city. Like, everybody's dead. What happened? And not only him, but all his followers see this too. Let's look at this. Verse 2. And had taken the women captive that were therein. They slew not any, but David don't know that yet, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire. And their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. You know, because they all just came back to their home burnt to the ground. Their entire city burnt to the ground. And they're mad. Look. And David was greatly distressed. Did I skip something? Verse 5. And David's two wives were taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess and Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. All right, so you have David, he's the leader of these people. He comes back and everything's been burnt to the ground and destroyed. And his own guys are turning on him now. They're like, David, you got us in this mess. All of our women and children are dead or captive. We don't know where they're at. Everything's burnt to the ground. We've lost everything, David, because we've been following you. And they want to stone him. Now, think about David in this situation. David's been kind of out of the will. I mean, David kind of brought this on himself too, because he's been out of the will of the Lord. He hasn't been doing what is right. But just because you're out of the will of the Lord, the devil's still going to attack. I mean, we see before David jumps out of the will of the Lord for a minute, he is in the will of the Lord and he's still being attacked. So here's the thing. In the will of the Lord, out of the will of the Lord, you're still going to be attacked. But if God, the difference is God on your side or not? Because remember, Saul keeps getting attacked too, but he reaches out to God for help and God doesn't answer him. Why? Remember why God doesn't answer Saul? Because Saul has all this sin in his life that he's not getting out of his life, and Saul will not repent and turn around and do what is right. It's not always God's going to turn his back on you if you're sinning, but it's your heart. It's your attitude. Are you willing to follow the Lord? Are you willing to do what is right? Now, and we've talked about this too. There's a difference in sin. There's a difference in purposefully sinning and accidentally sinning. You know, we live in this life and we're all going to sin. And I'm not giving anybody an excuse. I'm not giving David an excuse. Sometimes you slip up and things happen, right? We do what is wrong. But it's a different mentality when you do what is wrong and you don't care. When you're like, well, I'm going to go drink. I know drinking is wrong, but I don't care. I'm going to do it anyways because I want to. Or if you're out in the wrong place at the wrong time and you slip up and you have a drink, like, man, I should have done that. That was stupid. You know, I mean, that's kind of an odd thing to say, but, you know, sometimes you just slip up and sometimes you do things on purpose. And God is looking at David's heart here. David's kind of slipping up and going down the wrong path where Saul was doing things purposefully and he was purposefully not obeying the Lord. And look how it came back to bite everybody. Let me show you this, because look who attacked David's city. The Amalekites. Remember when we first started this journey? Way back when we looked at Saul, and Saul was supposed to wipe out who? The very first lesson we had. Saul was supposed to wipe out the Amalekites. All of them. You remember that? Whoever was here when we started this, Saul was supposed to wipe out all the Amalekites. And he didn't, obviously. Because there's some left and they're attacking. They didn't only attack Ziklag. They attacked the south of Judah too. And 1 Chronicles shows us that. As a matter of fact, turn to 1 Chronicles chapter 29. I want to show you because this is where Chronicles and Samuel start to parallel passage. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. And Chronicles gives us a little bit of information here. Chapter 12. I'm sorry. I said 29, but I meant 12. I need to pull my paper out here and pay attention. 1 Chronicles chapter 12. You can just keep your finger in 1 Samuel. We'll flip back here in just a minute. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 19. Let me read this for you. And there fell some of Manasseh to David. And when he came with the Philistines against Saul to battle, but they helped him not. For the lords of the Philistines, upon advisement, sent him away, saying, he will fall to his master Saul to the jeopardy of our heads. So we can see that is the time when David came with the Philistines against Israel, and the masters of the Philistines said, hey, you're not allowed to fight with us. We're going to send you home. But when it says there, and there fell some of Manasseh to David, that doesn't mean, and Manasseh was a tribe in Israel, okay? Manasseh is Israelites. They are God's people. And when it says they fell to David, what it means is they pledged their allegiance to David. They looked at David and they said, hey, David, we know that there's this big thing going on, but we are going to be on your side. Let's keep reading here. Look at verse 20. As he went to Ziklag, so he leaves and he goes to Ziklag, there fell to him of Manasseh, Adnah and Jozabad and Jedidiel, and Michael and Jozabad and Elihu and Zilthai, captains of the thousands that were of Manasseh. And they helped David against the band of rovers. That's the Amalekites that just wiped out Ziklag, okay? For they were all mighty men of valor and were captains of the host. So, during this time, he still has people in Israel who are looking at him saying, hey, we still need to follow David. David is God's man. David is the one that's chosen. Now, David is making mistakes, but David's just a man. You still have people recognizing the fact that God is on David's side. So, I mean, just because you make mistakes sometimes doesn't mean that God's going to shut you out and just kick you to the curb. It's all about your heart. Are you accidentally screwing up? Because we're all accidentally going to screw up. I do it every day. Or are you purposefully like, you know what? I don't care what God says. I don't care what that preacher said at church. I don't care what Pastor Brent says. I'm going to do what I want to do. How is your heart? Are you accidentally screwing up? If so, fine. I mean, you're still wrong. You still need to try to do what is right. But God's not going to just kick you to the curb. And people are recognizing this. Even though David's just a man and he's screwing up here and there, he's still God's man. So these tribes of Manasseh, they pledge their allegiance to David when he shows up to battle Israel. And what we don't see in chapter 30, let's keep reading because I want to show you, it doesn't point, we can go back to chapter 30 now. I just wanted to point that out that David has people joining with him. And this is going to be important later on in the story if we get to it today. That he has more people than, remember, when he started, he had the 600. You remember that? He had the people, and these were like the lower dregs of society. They were the people who were in debt to people and who were discomfited and disquieted, the Bible says. And like today in America, everybody's in debt. That's no big deal. But back then, to be in debt was a big deal. You were kind of like a lowlife, like a scum or whatever, to be in debt. But all these people, you know, the kind of lower lives of society came to David because they were looking him as their comfort and their strength, you know, and God's people isn't always the biggest, the greatest, the prettiest, the well-dressed, the most money. Sometimes it's, you know, it's the people who are of a lower stature that we look at in our eyes as lower stature. Those are the people that God chooses, right? God chooses people of lower stature sometimes. And David's little 600-man army, he's been going around just wreaking havoc. Remember that city? That there was a city and it got attacked by the enemy. And Saul was the king of Israel. And Saul should have protected this city from being attacked. But Saul was too busy chasing David. So David and his 600, little men of 600 went and saved this city. You guys remember that story as we've been reading through this? I mean, David's been doing great things with this little 600-man army. And they're not soldiers. They're farmers and field hands and servants and whatever. Like the Bible was saying, they're just servants and kind of low lives and lower dregs of society that really don't have a name or a reputation or anything going for them. But one thing they do recognize, the man of God, and that they are going to follow the man of God, right? And other people are starting to see this too. So you have Manasseh, the tribe of Manasseh sees David and like, hey, we're going to pleasure whatever you decide to do. If you decide to go against Israel, we're just going to follow you. Whatever you're going to do, David, we recognize you're going to be the next ruler, so we're going to follow you. Well, they follow David back, and it ends up that his town Ziklag gets wiped out. Now, it doesn't mention the tribe of Manasseh helping David in chapter 30, because chapter 30 is just focusing on David's 600 men, because there's another story inside this story, and we're about to read it right now. But chapter 30 is just focusing on David's 600 men. But we do see the other men show up here at the end of the chapter. So let's keep reading. I just wanted to make sure you knew that when David goes out to get these people, it's not just him and his 600 men. There's more people there, as seen in 1 Chronicles chapter 12. So look at verse 6 again. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. Look at this. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. You know, this goes to show you sometimes you're down in the dumps and there's nobody to help you. Everybody's against you, right? I mean, David's own people are against him. His wives got caught in the crossfire. They're not there to help and support him. David's alone. And David has nobody to encourage him, but understand God is always there to encourage you, right? God is always there to lift your spirits. You can always turn to the Lord in every single situation. So David encourages himself in the Lord. He's like, you know what? I've been screwing up. What should I do? So he goes to God. He says, and David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. Remember the ephod? This is the thing that the priest would put on and pray to the Lord and they would get an answer, right? It's just a symbol. It's not that the breastplate or that the thing that they put on was special or magical. It's just a symbol and a way to reach the Lord in the Old Testament. I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought hither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So God says, yes, go get these people. Go get everything back. You will not fail. I am behind you. Go get these people and get all your stuff back. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those that were left behind stayed. Now that sentence will make sense here in just a second. Look at verse 10. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the brook Besor. So David has 600 of his men. Now remember, Chronicles shows us that Manasseh has a bunch of troops as well. But the troops of Manasseh don't necessarily belong to David. They're just a friend. They're like, hey, we're here to help. We don't belong to you necessarily, but we definitely will help you. So but the 600 people belong to David. But what this is saying is they get to a certain point and 200 of the men can't go any farther. They are just completely wore out. And they're like, man, we can't go anymore. We physically can't go anymore. So, and we'll come back to that in just a second too, because you may think a certain way about what happens here, but David looks at this a completely different way. So he allows them to stay behind. So now there's only 400 of David's men, and 400 are going towards the Amalekites. Now we'll keep going in verse 11. And they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. So the 400 keep going. The 200 can't go any farther. Like I said, they're just field hands and farm hands. They're not soldiers. They're not built for this life. Even though they've been doing great things for the Lord, they're not necessarily built for just constant war and constant fighting. And that's all they've been doing this entire time is just war and fighting. And they are just wore out. They physically can't go any farther. So he takes his 400 men and they keep going towards these Amalekites, and they find this guy laying in a field. He's sick and he's just laying there, okay? He's an Egyptian. And they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he did eat, and they made him drink water. And they gave him a piece of a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him, for he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, to whom belongest thou? And whence art thou? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me because 3 days agone I fell sick. We made and this is the guy still talking. Now he's an Egyptian. He's a servant to the Amalekites. This guy got sick, so the Amalekites left him behind. But this shows David he's on the right trail, right? Because the Amalekites are the ones that wiped out his city. So this is a guy that the Amalekites left behind because they were sick, because he was sick. And here's the Amalekite still talking. He's getting information out of the Amalekite. To whom belongest thou? Whence art thou? And when he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me because 3 days agone I fell sick. Verse 14. We made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites, and upon the coast of which belongeth to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. Now that shows you they didn't just attack Ziklag. They attacked the south of Judah. They attacked Israel. So while all these armies are out to battle, the Philistines went out to battle. David followed the Philistines, remember? But Israel lined up for battle too, because here comes the Philistines. So Israel comes out of their homes and lines up for battle. So all the men of war are out to battle. So these Amalekites, remember they were wicked, disgusting people, and Saul was supposed to wipe every one of them off the face of the earth. God told him to do that, but he didn't. So now here comes back this sin from Saul's past. And while all the men of war are out to war, out battling with each other, these roving band of miscreants, these Amalekites, come through and start wiping out everybody at both sides. David's city gets burnt down. Philistine city gets burnt down. Israelite cities get burnt down. They're all out fighting in their wars. They left their women and children behind. And these miscreants are just out roving, pillaging, and just stealing everything. This is what's going on. Because all the men of war are gone, and they know this. Well, all the men of war are gone. We can just go take everything, go take the women and the children, and we can just have our way. We can just have whatever we want. Belongs to Judah in the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. This is the Egyptian telling David where he was and what he's been doing. And David said to him, canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, swear unto me by God that thou wilt neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. So he finds this Egyptian who was a servant to the Amalekites, the guys that just wiped out Ziklag. And he says, take me to the people that left you here. Now, notice what he does. Now, let's say David was in his old state of mind. Remember, in his old state of mind, before he encouraged himself in the Lord and got right, he was kind of acting a little crazy. He had got this town out of the Philistines, and he started attacking other towns just like this and started wiping them out for his gain. Because David was nothing but a great army. Remember we talked about that? And David's huge army, he was nothing but an army that needed fed and clothed. So the only thing they could do at this point is fight and kill people for stuff. David was living wickedly. Now imagine David came upon this man in this time. He probably would have tortured him and beat him for the information. But David is right with the Lord at this point. And one thing I want to point out, and I actually heard a pastor point this out one time preaching through this passage, and I liked it. David didn't torture this guy for the information. Now what do we do in America today? We have these terrorist laws that say we're allowed to torture people for information. We have Guantanamo Bay, we have all these things, right? And people will say, well, that's not that bad because the terrorists aren't us. They're not a part of us. We can torture people, and we can torture Osama bin Laden, and we can torture whoever. And I'm not like a fan of terrorists or anything, but the problem with allowing torture is every time a nation allows torture like that, the nation ends up torturing its own people. Whether you look back in the days of China and the days of Mao Zedong, or you look in Germany, wherever you look at, you find these nations that allow torture, they usually turn on their own people. Now in America, for a long time, we had laws saying you're allowed to torture terrorists. But recently, and I don't know how much recently, maybe 10 years ago, 12 years, I don't remember how long ago it was, they started making laws to where terrorists can be those of our own nation. That people in our own nation, American citizens, can be deemed terrorists in terrorist organizations. And you literally have churches and groups out there today, right now, that are being deemed a terrorist organization. And you guys can see where this is going. So America has made a law saying that you can torture terrorists. Now, later on, they make a law saying that terrorists can be those of our own country. Because back when they made the law that you're allowed to torture terrorists, nobody cared. Oh, because it's other people. That ain't us. Yeah, let torture other people. Who cares? Well, now the other people are you. Right now, and then now they're making church groups terrorists. They're making all these good organizations that don't agree with the government. They're terrorist organizations. You can see where this is going. Eventually, they're going to be capturing Christians, and we can see the end times playing out right before our very eyes. And the reason God doesn't want torture, I mean, you can go through the entire Bible, and you will never find torture a necessary means for war. God never condones torture, ever. Now, he'll condone punishment. Like if somebody steals something, they might get a beating or a whipping, but they get, if you steal 4 cows, you might get 8 lashes with the whip or whatever, and that's all you get. There's not this, we're going to take you into a hidden room and we're going to whip you 8 times. Now you give us information. Now we're going to waterboard you and we're going to cut your fingers off and all this stuff. No, God never condones torture at all. Because like I said, every single time a nation has condoned torture, it ends up turning on its own people. So America makes this law that says anybody can be a terrorist. We're going to treat everybody the same. U.S. citizen or not U.S. citizen, anybody can be a terrorist. Now, I agree we should treat everybody the same, but I don't agree that we should be able to torture anybody. See where this leads? This leads to now American citizens can be tortured by its own government. And we probably don't hear about this yet, but I bet it's happening. I guarantee you behind closed doors there are American citizens being tortured by its own government. And God never allowed this. God never prescribed this. And we see David here. He doesn't do this either. What does he do to get the information out of the enemy? He finds an enemy and he can take him as a prisoner of war. But what does he do? Instead of torturing him and waterboarding him and ripping his fingernails off, what's he do? He gives him food. He gives him water. He says, hey man, let me help you. He's nice to his enemy. He's loving to his enemy. Right? And then in the meanwhile, this enemy is like, hey, I'll take you down there. Just don't turn me over to them. You're treating me so well, I'll just join you. I'll just be a part of you. It seems like you're doing what is right. I really didn't like what these guys were doing anyways. Just let me join you. He's like, yeah, okay, fine. Take me down there. So you see how differently things can be? How by following the will of the Lord, you can treat your enemies well and with respect, and you can get what you want, or you can be a child of the devil. You can be literally a nation that follows the devil and be torturing people and end up torturing your own town and torturing your own people. But let's keep reading. I really don't want to get off into that, but I heard a preacher point that out one time, and I thought it was very, very interesting. How David treats this guy with compassion and gets the information that he needs versus torturing him. Because this is literally a time of war. So, and David said, canst thou bring me down to this company? And he will swear to me by God that thou wilt neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he had brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing because of all the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. So, he finds them. He finally finds the Amalekites. They're there partying, drinking, having a good time, just using up all the spoil that they had taken away from Judah and from the Philistines, right? And David smote them from the twilight even into the evening of the next day. So he basically whips their butts for about 24 hours straight. Just goes in and just manhandles these people. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away. And David rescued his 2 wives. And there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all, just like God said he would do. God said, go get these people, go get your stuff back. You will not lose a single thing. And he didn't. He got every single thing back. Verse 20, and David took all the flocks and the herds which they drave before those other cattle and said, this is David's spoil. So what happened here is they don't only have David's stuff. Remember, they had spoiled all of Israel and all the Philistines. They had a lot more than just David's stuff. So David said, all this extra stuff, that's going to be mine. And he doesn't keep it to himself for a selfish reason. I'll show you in a minute why he keeps it. But it ain't for no selfish reason. He said, all this, though, this extra stuff, it's mine. Don't touch it. And there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all, and he took all the flocks and the herds which they drave before those other cattle and said, this is David's spoil. Verse 21. And David came to the 200. Now we're back to the 200 men. Remember the 200 men that stayed behind, that were sick, that couldn't go any farther, that just physically couldn't go anymore? David came to the 200 men, which were so faint that they could not follow David, whom they had made also to abide at the brook Besor. And they went forth to meet David and to meet the people that were with him. And when David came near to the people, he saluted them. Then answered, now look at this. Then answered all the wicked men and men of Belial. We'll come back to men of Belial probably next week. I'm going to explain to you what men of Belial is and what it means. But we'll skip that for a second. I mean, obviously these are wicked men. Of those that went with David and said, because they went not with us, we will not give them aught of the spoil that we have recovered, save to every man his wife and his children, that they may lead them away and depart. So you got these wicked men. It says these 200 men, they don't deserve anything. We'll give them back their wives and their kids, and they can just leave because they didn't go with us. But look at David's answer. That's not David's answer. Look what David said. Then said David, ye shall not do so, my brethren, with that which the Lord hath given us, who hath preserved us and delivered the company that came against us into our hand. For who will hearken unto you this matter? But as his part is that goeth down to battle, so his part that tarrieth by the stuff, they shall part alike. So here's what David was saying. David was saying, these people couldn't physically go anymore. Nonetheless, as we went to battle, we had a bunch of stuff that was slowing us down. So it worked out good for us. We set off all this stuff that was slowing us down, and we left 200 men that also couldn't go any farther to keep this stuff. We went down, we won the battle, we came back, all of our stuff is still here. David's saying these 200 men had a part in this, because if they wasn't here, all of our stuff would probably be gone. We needed to set this stuff off so we could move faster But nonetheless, and these people were a help. They were a blessing, and they deserve reward just as much as us who went down to the battle. We can see this in our churches today. Kind of put this into perspective in your church in here. We have people who are physically, we talk about going out soul winning, knocking doors. But sometimes we have people who physically can't do that, right? We have elderly who physically cannot go out and do that. Do they not deserve the spoils and blessings of God because they physically can't do it? No. That's what David is pointing out here. We'll pick up back with that next week. We'll pick up with that thought, and we'll talk about these men of Belial. But yeah, David's saying here is that just because somebody can't physically do a specific thing doesn't mean that they don't deserve rewards, right? So we'll get back to that next week. We are dismissed.